Well, I've just uploaded some very interesting files that apparently patrons and staff alike here at the Ann Arbor Public Library don't want me to open and upload to the internet. Let's try to find out what they are. I just scanned them on the scanner here successfully. I have them in hard copy. I put them there. Normally, I can just open them via Adobe Acrobat Reader. I think that's what it's called, right? But off of my flash drive, because this is my flash drive. But I find it that it is easier to open any document once it is saved and being opened on the internal drive for some reason. So let's try to make things easy. Yeah, let's try to do that. Oops. Oh, you know what? I could have gone that way with it, but I also want my Google Photos to get a copy of the open document. So that transferred well enough. Thank you. So, now that we're done with the flash drive, we take it out immediately so that hackers can't do what they do best. Even better with documents stored on internal drives, but even better than that when documents are stored on internal micro SD drives. But the most difficult they have a chance at hacking and manipulating and deleting files is when they are resident on a flash drive. That's as far as I can explain and tell you about that. Oh, all right then. Ooh. Now, this is interesting. This card was left in front of my bedroom door, basically. Um, I'm not quite sure if by Alexander Raskine of the University of Michigan Metabolomics Department of the Kellogg Eye Institute himself, or his son Gregory Raskine, who was a student at the University of Michigan and is a master thief of electronic devices such as my cell phone in the past. But and he has a fetish for poisoning toothbrushes and with tainted toothpaste, and a fetish for going in my wallet and smearing it with a substance that attracts electromagnetic radiation. An example of which can be seen on a photo of a dollar bill that I took, and even the 15th District Court clerks took for proof that I made a payment to Alexander Raskine, which he did not accept, thereby obstructing my means to pay on the summary judgment against the law, and then indicating on an application for eviction writ that I had paid nothing towards the summary judgment, which would have effectively prohibited by law the issuing of an eviction writ. And so that picture of that dollar, which can be seen on both my Facebook and my YouTube, shows it shows radiation surrounding the dollar. And interesting enough, after I was evicted, the bailiff, which you can see in the video, made it clear to me that I could pick up my things between 24 and 48 hours. I went back about 7, 8 hours, and my stuff was gone completely. Just gone. And he kept the dollar that I paid him towards the summary judgment. All right. After that few seconds of pause, let's move on to the other document, right? Oh, well, let's explain what we were looking at. Can we do that? Can we go back? Yeah. Well, we'll do that in summary. Let's see this one. Well, okay. Keeping to my word, we'll do all this in summary. Let's start with simple first. If you don't mind, I'm going to transfer these documents first to a folder in which my Google Photos will immediately back them up, because I'm surrounded by suspects, hackers. As I promised, despite my impulse to immediately upload them. Nucleophile versus electrophile. I've actually seen these cards before, the two that we're gonna review here, and others, and those are in videos to come to be uploaded. I am not the best person to give the most articulate summary of the meaning of these words. You and I both can look them up. But in general, basically, nucleophile represents, the subject of atomic energy, or, atomic energy, how should I say, radiation, but see, that's still broad too. Nuclear. Is the best that I can feel confident to articulate. And then electrophile, I guess we both can deduce what that probably means. That's another radiation scandal here at the Ann Arbor Library downtown, 5th Avenue. But keeping on point here, so nuke, when I first discovered these cards, they didn't have the extra writing on them. And it's actually interesting that they must have wrote that out with a special pen that can't be seen, because actually when I first saw this card, it looked kind of more like that, but I'm going to take a picture so that you can see what I really see, hopefully to the eye, which is this nuke here, which represents the nucleophile terminology. There's this explanation here, but which I don't know yet. But this little scribble after nuke, to the eye on the card, it says gas, and that was included. I don't know how they did that. I just remember some scribble, but I don't remember the word gas. But then it seemed like gas was added subsequently, and apparently added with a different kind of pen that does not reveal itself easily to scanning or copying. So kind of clever. As a kind of coded writing for only my eyes to see. And same over here. For electrophile on the card, it actually um, well, what does that say? Acid. So the nuke is a gas form, and the electrophile is an acid, and and that would explain a lot, really. Uh, the documents that I have that attract um, it seems to they seem to attract a really strong electric charge um, on my clothing, on my bedding. I've made videos about experiences in my room while laying on these beddings that attract this charge. But then I've also felt a sense of being gassed. And so this is not my handwriting, and this is beyond my knowledge um, of um, of writing. So I didn't do it. Let's have a look. Isn't that interesting? Gas, right? And then here, I know at first glance it's hard to tell or decipher what that word is. But since I've studied it a little longer than you, A, C, I, and then that's virtually a D, but the two parts that make a D are somewhat disconnected. So, a not uncommon signature trait of print for some. And I'm sure once all that's deciphered by the apropos scientific mind, probably not all that advanced, really, um, into the subject, such as a graduate level, maybe. The word acid would make sense and be justified. And same here, the word gas. Interesting, huh? Oh, just to make sure it's the same card. There you are. Nucleophile versus electrophile. All right. Now, on to the next card. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go backwards since I have the camera on already. In the procedure. I don't know what that is. I'll have to look it up. But maybe one of you do. Is that methionine? There's something in the back here that I imagine explains it in more detail. So I don't know who's writing. That is between Alexander Raskin and his junior Gregory Raskine. But these were left, very conspicuously by my bedroom door shortly after taking some of the very scary videos that I have of substances and materials in Alexander Raskine's front room green and white desk that apparently he shares with his son, Gregory Raskine, as a study, and then posting some of that on the internet. They both have a temper, different kinds, but the connecting trait of their temper is that my vocabulary is limited because I've been up for more than 24 hours and I'm tired and I'm hungry and blah, 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 and I apologize. Extreme arrogance, just extreme, as if a sense of a lack of inhibition to mitigate any kind of consequence from any of their actions. They just have these very godly, demi-godly kind of tempers, where even if they do wrong, they experience a shock of the conscience to an extreme that someone would dare conceive of approaching them about any type of inquiry to mitigate their own perceived harm or damages caused by their maybe astute engagement of damage or harm conducting against that person, such as myself, or arrogant disregard, and that's a hacker. Arrogant disregard and I mean, perhaps it's they really just perceive themselves as such lofty geniuses, and they do work and exist in a very esoteric, specific sphere of science, and it's minute and it's intricate and to a great degree occult to that of general knowledge that a layperson most certainly would have, and perhaps for that matter even an undergraduate of a general broad study of subjects of sciences, or even a broad study of a science that is even approaching these disciplines specific hacker, such as biology or even microbiology. I mean, these people deal in acids and gas and metabolomics, cells that consume cells as a process of digestion, and some irradiated and some not, and some required to live and some not, and all the different technology that they use to manipulate and gather data and advance and observe. And I mean, I understand the sense of culture that they have, and commitment and maybe even loneliness, but then furthermore, I mean, if you're one of a few thousand of professionals, or if that have such rare knowledge and work with such rare aspects of living organisms. And then you're at an institution such as University of Michigan that seems to be so flagrant in supporting such heirs, with models most conspicuously known as Forever Valiant, the Conquerors, and so forth and so on. So these are the kind of people Alexander Raskine and his protege son, Junior, Gregory Raskine are, and Hacker, and I, Gregory Raskine are, and I lived with them for a good 7 months, and it was interesting, and I learned so much. But I fear that it was at a extreme cost of being exposed to acids and gas and radiations and fMRIs, which use extreme magnetic fields caused by radio frequencies that can be manipulated through the electric socketry in the walls of my bedroom. I don't have the schematics for it all, but I most certainly tried to investigate it the best I could, and I put forth faithfully all that I discovered publicly on Facebook and now also on YouTube. So I'm sorry, I really did not mean to make this that long-winded, but I'm trying to bring you into the world of these kind of people, Hacker, to bring you into the world of these kind of people, and to try to illustrate for you motive. And then Hacker, oh yes, they don't want me to talk about motive. Motive, and well, motive is Johnny come lately, right? Money. And it's easier to make money and to command more of it if you are one of the few, if not the only one, with a honey pot with honey to sell on the block. That's an analogy. So, you've been looking at this test. I came to Ann Arbor, back to Ann Arbor. I went to school at Huron High School and graduated. And then I went on to other institutions. I did a little study at the School of Music, but not formally, here in Ann Arbor. But I came back down on my luck, and ultimately ended up in the homeless shelter here, the Delana Center Shelter, and then that all became an awful circumstance, of which I've posted documentation of on previous Hacker, of which I've posted documentation of on previous Facebooks that have been hacked. So I'll have to catch up that documentation on a Hacker. I'll have to catch up that documentation on this Facebook. But back to the circumstance here. I came to Ann Arbor April 6th of 2016, and I had such an awful, terrible experience in Sandusky, Ohio, and that's another matter. And so I was homeless for about a week there, and I slept in the woods and even in the post office there, because the lobby was open 24 hours. But the police found out these brick and mortars that I was sleeping in, such as the Amtrak train station and then they come and they knew that I was astute about the law. They just didn't know to what extent, and I was nowhere near as astute then as I was now. But nonetheless, I was still a threat to them. So they harassed me, but cautiously, up into a point in which I had a conflict with some doctors at the general hospital there, and then I had to defect from Sandusky because I was suffering physically and emotionally to extremes, and I had some type of I don't know, some type of infection, jaw, tooth, gum infection. It's true. I did have a intimate encounter with someone, and perhaps I was not the most judicious in how I used my mouth in that encounter, and I believe that that was ultimately the cause of it. But I don't engage in riskier sex than that, and generally, okay, considerably generally, and so I had no reason to believe that I would have some type of sexually transmitted disease. But upon coming to the University of Michigan here on April 6th and telling them that I had been what I had been through with the police and being homeless and then sleeping in the woods and thinking that I was seeing animals that may not have been there. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Who knows? I was sleeping in the woods. That's abnormal. And it was pitch dark. And then there was the physical element. So what they did was based on what I just told you, a hacker. So what they did was based on exactly what I just told you, exactly, no more and no less. A hacker. Based on everything I've just explained, a hacker. Based on everything I've just explained that I've been through in Sandusky, a hacker. They ran these tests for the small amount of information that I just told you of what I experienced in Sandusky, and the physical elements that I was experiencing, the swelling of my jaw and the inflammation of my gums. And well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Doctors would be able to interpret if a hacker, if all this testing was necessary. Not only does it look like a lock, but it looks very detailed. And perhaps far removed from the report of a one-night stand encounter of oral sex. So, if you're a doctor, you call it. I admit that is what my insurance paid. Apparently, because I had Medicaid at the time, as I still do now. All this stuff on there is something that Alexander Raskin doused on this in my wallet. He didn't have the nerve to steal it because then he ran the risk of being discovered associated with this document. But this has been in my wallet and nowhere else. Not in my book bag, in my wallet. My mother gave it to me. It came to her address for some reason some time ago. That's my old address before I moved to Sandusky. So it must have been sent there because that is what was on file when I first came back April 6, 2016, and then it was forwarded to my mother's address that arranged to have my mail forwarded to. Um, but this is the beginning of unprofessional misdiagnosis of my um, mood disorder and attention deficit disorder. These codes, I looked them up, basically characterize me as psychotic or with psychotic features. Um, Never in my life have I been diagnosed with that, but um, 2012, up until this incident, I was consistently diagnosed with and successfully treated for the diagnosis of major clinical depression and attention deficit disorder with medications Lexapro and Adderall. There was some experimentation before with other stimulants and other medications, but that combination really works, really helps me in so many ways, and it makes me feel, um, how should I say, in control of my emotions. It helps me. It helps me cope. It helps me think with clarity. It helps me have a sense of well-being, a sense of empathy. It gives me a sense of will, of drive and determination and promise and hope. The medication does all of that, those two. One without the other is lacking. But the two together is a winning combination. But and University of Michigan understood that, and they treated me as such, regardless of this initial diagnosis, for 8 months under a doctor named Alyssa Young, a, a brilliant, nice, dispositioned um, internist that I had a wonderful relationship with up until um, 4 or 5 months ago. Well, no. Well, up until January 12th of 2017, and the University of Michigan Police was at the office. They didn't approach me. They didn't talk to me, but she just acted very strange. She asked me about intravenous drug use. She brought up the fact that I had used some profanity in the hallway and that those police were called, but the police never spoke to me, and I may have used profanity, but I wasn't being disruptive. Otherwise, I'm sure the police would have approached me. But nonetheless, I believe that was the beginning of the orchestration of a campaign to enforce this misdiagnosis. And then somehow use that to justify unconsented to research of something on the order of fMRI and or radioactive gas exposure and or electromagnetic energy attracted by acid resins doused on my clothes and coins and papers in my wallet and then cobalt blue, perhaps as a treatment substance, I'm guessing, in which were smeared in used shoes that I bought at the Salvation Army here in Ann Arbor on State Street, I believe, or Industrial, in that area. But of course, I looked in the shoes. a hacker. Um, I'm I have some a hacker a hacker. I have some OCD. I wouldn't buy anything without thoroughly examining it. Um, let alone a pair of shoes that I was going to put my feet in. I'm fond of my feet, um, and I have a great appreciation for feet. So male feet. So um, well, you could just imagine. Uh, I would not take shoes. I would not take shoes used or new lightly. Um, but yet you can see on videos and pictures on my Facebook of smeared blue substances and burned sides of leather in the insoles. Um, uh, I didn't do it. Um, I showed you videos of um, coat hangers, clothes hangers in my closet that have come up warped and burned, um, which corresponds to an intense amount of energy that I have felt emitting from the closet on a number of occasions, as well as from the ceiling of my bedroom on occasions, as well as in the kitchen, which seemed to come from the ceiling as well, um, as well as this very, very murky um, bacteria infested, and I believe radioactive bacteria infested couch in the front room of the apartment that I shared with Alexander Raskin and his son Gregory. Ugh. When you see it, you'll be appalled. Um, and so here we have the beginning of this diagnosis. And what's inappropriate about this diagnosis is this is an emergency room visit. Um, so this is not a psychiatric evaluation. And it may not even be necessarily from a psychiatrist, a hacker, and this diagnosis may not even be necessarily from a psychiatrist. So it's a hacker, So it's just not appropriate that this kind of diagnosis is made for an emergency room hospital visit. But nonetheless, it is a diagnosis that subsequent visits that I've had to the psychiatric department floor at the University of Michigan um, have been have been justified by mischaracterization. I don't know if that English came out right, but basically what I'm saying is the professionals at the psychiatric department or floor at the University of Michigan, for most of my visits there during really hard times in which a hacker, in which I had awful confrontations with the Ann Arbor Police Department officials. A hacker, and never going to the psychiatric floor for symptoms that just came out of the blue that were not agitated by a catalyst or an adverse stimuli. A hacker. So the majority of those visits, I was actually given my medication of Lexapro and Adderall, and I showed such remarkable results of remission of my extreme depression during those episodes that I was released the next day. As I was saying, I was released the next day in most of those instances. But after January 12th of 2017, I know for sure that every visit that I made to the hospital regardless of if I gave a justified reason for um, um, my symptoms having a catalyst or an adverse stimuli. Apparently, according to Dr. Young, have been noted as a psychotic episode. And I went to the Depression Center of University of Michigan, and an incompetent, a hacker, an incompetent PA, an incompetent PA named Maria Bastida misdiagnosed me as having a history of psychosis. And it completely, how should I say, a hacker, completely ignoring a hacker, completely ignoring my history of depression and attention deficit disorder. In fact, she eventually stripped attention deficit disorder off the list. A hacker. And the point of all that is I'm probably exceptionally bright, but I'm rendered very slow in my cognition without Adderall. And my cognitive ability has improved when I don't have Adderall with my Lexapro from my just traumatic trials and tribulations here and living a day-to-day fight or flight lifestyle against not only law enforcement in Washtenaw County around the Ann Arbor area, but also members of the Ann Arbor community stalking me and attacking me and harassing me. So I've gotten better at coping without it. I don't have it now. I've been without it since the 29th, which is when I was supposed to have it refilled. So, and now my Lexapro's been thrown away by Alexander Rastkine as part of an unlawful eviction. So, I probably need to end this video quickly to try to mitigate that. But this is apparently the beginning of all of that. So, for the community, for the medical community of the University of Michigan, who may have not delved in as deeply into my medical history, it all began with this. And if that's appropriate to you, or if that seems like orthodox medical practice to you, it seems suspicious to me, even outside of the trade. So I think Michigan requires me to find another professional to concur in order to bring a suit. But this alone won't bring a lawsuit. It's just a most telling piece of evidence of what all I have experienced that I don't know enough about, but yet I've suffered tremendously and still continue to, from emotionally, financially, and socially. And socially. All right. Did anyone see a date on here? Okay, I don't know why. Oh, well, I mean, that's probably normal. 8/1/16 is when they paid for whatever they paid for there. But, there we are. 7/10. I was in the hospital. I was in the emergency room for a day, but then I was on the psych floor. So yeah, see, look, they gave me Adderall. That's the first time they did. But lab thyroid something, meta metabolic panel. Um, um, you go to an emergency room. You tell them you had um, an oral sexual encounter, and sometime shortly after, you went to a hospital and told them about it, and such as the one in Sandusky, Ohio, and they kept putting you off as having a toothache or a headache, and then it turns out to be perhaps an infection, and then you're given a bunch of antibiotics for that infection. But um, this 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 kind of testing is necessary for that kind of presenting circumstance and symptoms.